Hey, hello everyone. My name is Amaya, as you should probably know. And I'm the intern for Loyola's Office of Equity and Inclusion. So before we start, I just wanted to say why I wanted to do this internship. I grew up in a predominantly Black neighborhood, and when I was in high school, I went to the second most diverse school in Boston. So coming to the school was the first predominantly white space I had ever been in. When I was at home, like I was always surrounded by diversity. I never knew what it felt like to feel othered or excluded or intentionally made to feel uncomfortable until I got to the school. Although I've had a great experience at this school, there are times where I've been made to feel othered. So being at the school and feeling and having those experiences and seeing like what my peers have experienced and a bunch of other things as well has fueled my motivation to want to do work in DEI, because I don't believe in like the picking yourself up from your bootstraps theory, but I do think that everybody deserves an equitable and inclusive and diverse education. And I do believe that that can put your, maybe not like rise you to the next social ladder, but it give you opportunities that I think everyone deserves. So that is what I'm trying to do for my future. And that is why I wanted to be the intern for the Office of Equity and Inclusion. Are
you doing the back one?
I do it on the computer?
Sure.
Okay, so this is where the Office of Equity and Inclusion is located in the Humanities Building. So the purpose/mission is to meet the university's commitment to DEI with a unique system of leadership and a strategic plan to create a diverse, equitable, and inclusive environment. When I say unique system of leadership, I mean that there are 3 different people who are part of the leadership staff and they do different things. So there's Mariana Calucci, and she is the DEI special. She's the DEI fellow, so she mainly works with like faculty pertaining to like DEI initiative and issues pertaining to faculty and staff. Rona Little is the DEI specialist, and she mostly works with the student body, and that's who I work with mostly, but I'll explain that in other slides. And then the chief is Dr. Rodney Parker, and he basically works with all like everything. Whom does it serve? So the general body, students, faculty, and staff. Organization is geared towards supporting marginalized communities such as Alana, LGBTQIA+, commuter and disability services, and anything related to DEI on campus. So what I mean by that is, although the office is used to support marginalized communities, it's also used to educate those who do not identify as marginalized, to educate them on the ways in which they can make the campus feel more comfortable and inclusive to those who do identify as people of color. So this is through like diversity trainings. Not everybody in those trainings is a person of color. So this is why the office serves other people who are not people of color, just for like educational purposes. What does it achieve for individuals and on a greater scope? So it creates and fosters a diverse, equitable, and inclusive environment where issues regarding DEI are addressed. And in this sense, it holds the university accountable, because there's always going to be a center where students can come and say, okay, well, this is something that happened to me and it wasn't okay, or this is what's happening in my organization. I think we need more DEI initiatives in this place. So it's definitely a place where the university is held accountable, but to an extent, because this is not a separate organization, it's under Loyola's name. It creates a space where the injustices against people of color are acknowledged and discussed upon in relation to how it impacts the university. And it allows students of color to know that there is a place for them to be seen and heard. Okay, so the integration of my research paper and internship. So my paper topic is the use of diversity training, so students and staff. So basically I'm going to be exploring like how beneficial are they and who's really served, because again, I mentioned that the office is not a separate organization, nor is there an office for every department. So really, I love being an intern, but it really makes you question like who does it really serve? Because if it's under Loyola and Loyola is a PWI Jesuit community, like who does it really serve if it's not there's not an office in every department? Especially since like, for example, like Alana services, like I know for a fact that when I go into like the CIE, it's always going to be people who are either coming from the same background as me or have had the same experiences. As a person of color, the Office of Equity Inclusion is not like that because they serve everyone. It's not specific to marginalized communities. And the trainings that we do are required for many student organizations. And I know this because I'm an RA and I have been involved in other things as well where they are required. So again, I'll be exploring this usage because if they're required, and I think we all know if you force someone to do something, especially do something that they don't want to do at all or have no interest in, like you can really question the effectiveness of it. And I've also learned that like most people in general, like don't know a lot about what doesn't relate to them, which is a lot about like DEI. If you don't relate to it or feel that it doesn't interest you at all, you're not really going to pay attention to it. So this is just basically all of what I'm going to be discussing in my paper. Okay, so who do I work with in a typical day in my life? So this is Rona. And so she is the diversity and inclusion specialist, who I mentioned before, and she provides direct support to Loyola's community and plays a major role in the implementation of the office's vision and strategic plan for DEI. So I put her here and not the fellow or the chief, just because I mainly work with her. I see her every single week, and she's just my main like person for like support for like anything. And she's great. She's very welcoming. Is always very like nice to me. And she mainly deals with the student body. So anything that has to do with DEI and students, like that's Rona. So she deals with like the undergraduate diversity, advisory board, athletes, the different types of organizations that you see here are people that we work with as well. So Alana, first gen students, disability support services, Messina, student life, evergreens, commuter service, support services, intentional living, multilingual students. So a bunch of like student organizations on this campus. This is all of what Rona does and all of what I help her do. So my internship day basically consists of weekly meetings with Rona. So every single Monday I'll meet with her and then she'll ask me like how my week was and how like, and do I think I'm gonna have like a busy week, because it really depends on like what I'm doing that week. If I have a really busy week, then she won't assign a lot for me, which is great because it kind of allows me to, this internship to be more flexible, especially since I am the only intern for this office. Like this is not really a normal, like a regular thing. Like they didn't really have interns before I came in. So it's kind of nice that like the assignments I do, they don't revolve around my schedule, but in a way like they kind of do. So that's kind of nice. So in that week, she'll assign me with different things every single week, which is also nice because it's not very repetitive. I'm doing something different every single week. So that's really nice. So it could be like prepping for a training that we have, co-facilitating training we have, facilitating discussion, meeting with president council meetings, prepping for events, or reading informational books that have helped me with my career. So it's definitely a lot of different things that I do every single week. But it's good because it's very flexible. Okay, so intern success. So as I said before, a lot of my work is like planning and prepping events and like attending different things. So the Silver celebration is something that's coming up, I think next week, on April 19th. And this is something that I've been helping Rona plan. I actually made this flyer too, but it's an event that's celebrating graduating BIPOC, first gen, international, and LGBTQIA+ students. So you probably would have seen this if you identify as one of these categories, but it's just like one of the events that I've planned. The diversity trainings, that's definitely something that I've learned to like be able to co-facilitate with Rona. The first time I just watched, the second time I did like maybe like one part of it, the third time I did like 3 parts of it. So every single time I do one, she makes sure that I'm able to like do a different part of it. So by the end of the semester, I can do it by myself. So that's definitely something that is rewarding for me. This last one right here is a certificate that I made because I work with the diversity advisory advisory board for undergraduates. So it's basically a group of like different student leaders and different student organizations. So there's like an athlete in there, there's a tour guide in there, there's a evergreen in there. So there's different people from each organization, and we basically sit 1 to 2 times per month, and they tell me where DI initiatives are needed in their student organization. So it's me and Rona, and I'm taking notes and just hearing what they're saying, and then I'll relay the notes to Rona, and then she'll meet with them more personally to just figure out what needs to be done. So we're having an award ceremony for them next week, and that was just one of the awards I made for them. And part of this internship has really allowed me to like have a bond with some of the students on this campus that I wouldn't had I not had this. Like I don't really like socialize with a lot of people who are not like in our grade. So this has allowed me to do that and just create like connections with other kids and just like they can see me as a mentor as well. So it's been really nice to bond with them, and that award ceremony should be great. And then this one right here with Martin Luther King is the annual MLK convocation. So at the very beginning of the semester, I mentioned that I facilitated a conversation with Father Massingale. So that's just something that I plan. And even after that, they're planning for the next one next year. So that's something that Rona and I are also planning. And that consisted of me updating the contact list. So at first I thought it was going to be like just me like looking and like updating names, but Loyola is actually partnered with like a lot of people around Baltimore, which I did not know because I feel like Loyola's in this bubble. I mean, as I mentioned before, it's a PWI campus and it's in a Black neighborhood. So in my mind, I didn't think that we were that connected to like things outside, organizations and people outside of the school. But the list that they had, like it was like historically Black colleges, elementary schools around here, different support services around here. So it was really nice to be able to learn that Loyola is actually pretty connected, more than I thought, to the different organizations outside of Loyola. And then lastly for success, so since I've been doing these diversity trainings, I've had a couple like undergraduate students come up to me and say that they've enjoyed the training, which I was very surprised about, just because like the trainings that I've done, like as an RA, like I will say that I'm not always like 100% focused in those. I'm not always like in my A game, like paying attention. So the fact that like I had 2 hours of their time and they're coming up to me weeks later saying, I really enjoyed this. I really admire like your part, like that was definitely very rewarding to me, especially because one of them was like, oh, like, what do you do? I would really like to be like the intern, like next year, like I would really love to do that. So the fact that this office has never had an intern, and then when I'm in it, like I had someone to come up to me and say that they admire what I do and they want to be in this position after, that was definitely a part of my success in this position. Okay, so intellectual growth. So sociology has taught me that everything is connected. I've always loved sociology for that exact reason. That's why I wanted to go into sociology when I first came here. There's a reason why we interact in the way we do. There's a reason why we socialize. And I've learned about the relationships between social relationships and institutions by working in my internships. I'm the author of the book that we have for this class. He stated that we learned how our ways of thinking affect other people if we become more mindful. So my internship has definitely allowed me to become more mindful and aware of the problems that other people have. And it's allowed me to gain a deeper sense of mindfulness and awareness to the impact of my thoughts and actions on others. Especially pertaining to DEI, I feel like I've always thought about like race and gender and class, but I never really thought about religion or disability. And that's something that I've learned in my internship, that those two are very important. And as somebody who wants to go into DEI, like that's something that I really need to focus on, because it's DEI, like it includes everything. It's not just those three major ones. So I've definitely gained a deeper sense of awareness to what I'm paying attention to and what will affect people that I work with in the future. And so I've learned this impact that my actions have on other people. I put this book right here because a part of my internship is reading a lot of informational books that will help me in my future. Again, I said that I want to go into DEI, but I want to do DEI in higher education. So we're gonna assign me with reading this book, The Restorative Justice for Colleges and Universities. This was a really good book to read, just because not only do I want to go into this field, but I feel like as somebody who's a person of color, I went to a public school, I've been able to see how people of color, mainly Black men, Black young boys, how they're reprimanded in schools and how like the school prison pipeline and how that carries out. So this book kind of shows how that plays out in a college setting, like how the ways in which people do things now and how they should be doing it, which is where restorative justice comes in. So it's a very informational book for me to read, because again, if I want to create equitable and inclusive environments, restorative justice is a very important part of that. Lastly, self-growth. So I've learned leadership and interpersonal skills within the workplace and professionalism. As I stated in previous classes, I never really had like professional like internship before. All my jobs have been with younger kids, so you're getting on the ground with them, so I'm not wearing anything professional. So I've definitely learned how to do that and just be aware of like what I'm wearing, what I'm doing, because I'm definitely someone who like, I want people to like me, I want my professors to like me, I just want to be seen in, I guess a good light. So it's made me very conscious of like everything I do and everything I say, especially because this is something I want to go into. Again, I've learned a greater capacity for empathy and sympathy for the students on this campus. I've always had empathy and sympathy for those who are of color because I can relate to their experiences. However, in the board meetings I've had with other students, such as like athletes, I never really have seen or heard of their experiences. Like I have heard a lot of experiences of athletes of color in their teams and what it's like to be an athlete in their position, and just like hearing that, it just made me have a greater sense of empathy for them. The experience has allowed me to see what I do and don't like about the field, and it has enhanced my interest for the DEI field. So I put these books in because, again, I had to read books for my internship, and this first one right here is Right Within, How to Heal from Racial Trauma. So I was assigned this book by my professor, Andrea Meyer, and she's also someone who helps me with my internship. So it's basically about how to heal from racial trauma. I didn't know prior to reading this book how much racial trauma I have had, but I never experienced this in the workplace. So this is definitely a book that, in a way, kind of scared me because it talks a lot about what I will experience as a DI professional in this world. But it was also nice because it talks about like therapy. And if you're a person of color, you know that, especially in the Black community, therapy is frowned upon. It's not something that's talked about at all. It's not something that's praised, but this book really talks about how you don't always need to be this strong. You don't always need to put up a mean front. Like you can just relax and heal, and actually puts it be right within. The next book is the Racial Healing Handbook. Again, this is like practicing activities to help you challenge privilege. As somebody who's going into higher education, I would imagine that I would have some experiences in other PWIs. So this is just a book that I will be reading to counter different systemic racism. And lastly, Andrea, my professor, was told by a colleague of color that she can't give her students of color books about racial trauma and not give them something about Black joy or something that says how, and that like shows the pride, joy, and like celebration of being a person of color. So this is the last book that I would be reading called Black Joy. So yeah, that is the end of my presentation, but this is what I hope to do in my career.
Questions?
Good question.
What does accountability look like in DEI and like the creation of different initiatives when things do transpire on campus?
So I think it depends on the department, but I know for like student life, it just keeps on going up and up and up. So if I had like a problem in student life, I would go to my graduate assistant, and then they would go to their assistant, and then they would go to the director. So it just keeps going up, and it really depends on what the student wants to do. In terms of DEI, I haven't had, when I first started the internship, we actually had a conversation about that, me, Andrea, and Rona, and we asked her what problems are there, what would I encounter? And at the time she said that there's really nothing serious. I don't know if she said that just to say that. Maybe there's things going on that I don't know about, but I would assume that it's going directly to Rodney and he would do that. But again, this is a separate organization, so I don't have that question myself because if it's under Loyola, I don't really know how much accountability they'll really have.
Do you feel like this role needs more positions on campus past the places where it's already present?
I think so. And what you were saying, Bethany, actually kind of like sparked like this kind of conversation like in my mind, because when you were talking about how you switched from bio to sociology, one of the reasons being because you didn't have a representative that shared the same background as you in your bio. And then I have a friend who's in bio right now, and she's probably the only person of color in one of her classes too. So it just makes me think like if we had an office in the STEM departments, would there be more students there? So I definitely do think that we need more centers over campus, because this is only one. This is not really gonna do much if it's not being aware to every student.
Thank you.